a lot of times people would say, like, if I have to choose between the prenup and the flowers, I'm going to choose the flowers.
Hi, this is Deborah with Moneywise, and today we're talking to the CEO of HelloPrenup, an online platform for prenuptial agreements, Julia Rogers. Thanks so much for talking with me today.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I was reading about you, and you were a divorce lawyer for 10 years before you became an entrepreneur. So entrepreneurs find an unrecognized need that needs to be filled. So can you tell me a little bit about that journey and how you arrived at the idea of HelloPrenup?
Absolutely. So I was working as a family law attorney, and I was speaking to a lot of potential prenup clients. These were mostly millennials. They were getting married in just a few short months, and they all had very similar complaints. First and foremost, they didn't understand why it would take so long to do the prenup, right? So when you hire an attorney, there is typically about a 3 to 6 month period that it takes for two attorneys to negotiate, hammer out the details of this agreement. Second of all, so many of those clients were unable to actually even do a prenup just because there wasn't enough time. Secondly, they didn't want to pay me, a divorce lawyer, thousands of dollars to draft their prenup before they were even getting married. It didn't make sense to have to hire someone who is a divorce lawyer. And a lot of times people would say, like, if I have to choose between the prenup and the flowers, I'm going to choose the flowers. And then I think third, and most importantly, I saw that people felt there wasn't enough autonomy over the process. So couples routinely didn't understand why. They already knew what they wanted in this agreement. They had already had those conversations, yet they still had to, again, go through a divorce lawyer in order to draft this document. And that's where I knew that if I leveraged technology to build a platform that would allow couples to engage in this process together to co create their prenup, it was something that was very needed.
Yeah, it's really interesting because you've talked a little bit about it being seen as taboo still in society sometimes, even though their numbers are rising. There are certain scenarios where people think it's natural to have a prenup, like if it's celebrities with a lot of money, if there is a huge difference in income, or if there's an inheritance, parents are worried, or if there's a child from a previous marriage. What would you say about people who don't fit into those situations? Should they still be considering it?
Yeah, I think that everybody should get a prenup, right? And HelloPrenup is proof of that. We have customers who are billionaires and celebrities, but we have customers who are average everyday people, right? The average salary of a HelloPrenup user is $92,000, right? And they have about $78,000 in debt. So, you know, this platform was built. I built this for the everyday person. I think the other thing to keep in mind is, and this is evidenced by the average age of marriage in the United States right now is 34 years old. So by the age of 34, you probably have something to protect. Maybe you built a business. Maybe you bought a home, right? Maybe you have student debt that you want to protect your partner from, or potentially even inheritance coming down the line. And all of those necessitate a prenup. So again, by the average age of marriage in the US, people, I would say 98% of people need a prenup.
Yeah, and when we talk about prenups, we always think about financial planning, right? And dividing up assets. But then I don't know if you've seen it in tabloids have reported on the cocaine clause in Nicole Kidman's prenup agreement with Keith Urban. And I was just wondering, what are some things that can be included in prenups that, don't necessarily have something directly to do with finances, but you can put in there? Because I think a lot of people don't even realize that there are some things that you can include there.
Yeah, I mean, you see this all the time in celebrity prenups. I think the Nicole Kidman example is a really good one. We've also seen these weight loss clauses in celebrity prenups where, one party will dictate that if you don't lose the baby weight by a certain time, maybe it's 6 months or a year after birth, then you don't get X, right? There are also clauses. One of the most popular clauses for Hello Prenup in this vein are infidelity clauses, and those are actually up 3% for us since February. And those are clauses that, again, in certain states are enforceable, in some states are not. And I think what is most important about these clauses is that it prompts conversation. So when you're co creating a prenup, when you're negotiating these terms, there are going to be a lot of conversations that you have that maybe don't make it into the prenup, but they're still really important conversations to have because it ensures that you and your partner are becoming aligned prior to marriage.
Yeah, and as I guess our culture evolves, there's so many new things that come up. Like, I was looking at your page, and you're talking about fertility and sort of IVF treatments and embryos. And could you talk to me a little bit about that? How people can include that in the prenup as well?
Absolutely. That's one of our newest clauses, and I'm really, really proud of the work that we've done to create that. An embryo clause allows you to decide in your prenuptial agreement what should happen to any embryos that you have or any reproductive property, right? That could be frozen eggs or sperm upon a divorce. Now, the world of embryos and egg freezing and again reproductive technologies is really the wild west for law. But what I think is so important is that if you include these clauses in your prenuptial agreement, there is no ambiguity. You know, we have seen disastrous cases. There were some really notable ones across the country in the last 5 years where, you know, couples just sign off on these forms at the IVF clinic. They don't even know what they're signing, only come to find out upon a divorce that they waived their rights to this reproductive material. And it can be heartbreaking. I mean, there are circumstances where you see people lose access to embryos and not be able to have children after that point. So I think including this in your prenuptial agreement is incredibly important as a way not only to have the conversation with your soon to be spouse, but to ensure that you're protecting your reproductive rights in the long term.
Are there any new clauses that you're thinking of currently that I haven't seen or come come across?
We have a lot of really exciting stuff coming up at HelloPrenup. So we're always looking for new ways to support our customers based off of their requests. And yeah, there's a lot coming in the next 6 months. So
Okay, I'm excited to see it. I think I've heard a lot of people talk about broaching the topic of prenups, but I just want to talk about the being from the other side of it. When you're approached by your fiance, who wants a prenup, I see a lot of it online where people worry that this is a bad sign. Is it a red flag? Is it a problem? So if someone's approached to sign a prenup and they're nervous about it, or they're nervous about being taken advantage of, or being taken for a ride, what are some things that they should look out for so that that they can protect themselves and maybe feel a little calmer in the whole thing?
yeah. So the first advice I would give is to the person who is approaching their partner about a prenup, right? I think you have to approach that conversation very delicately. And I think you need to be able to adequately explain in a vulnerable way why it's something that's important to you, right? Are you a child of divorce? 24% of millennials are kids of divorce. Have you been divorced before? You know, the divorce rate is over 50%. Or maybe one of your best friends got divorced, or maybe you own a business or have potential future inheritance and this is something there's downward pressure from your parents, right? It's really important to explain the why so that you're both on the same page about not only the fact that this is really important to one party, but also how this prenup can protect both of you. I also think if you're the person who's on the receiving end of that and you feel really uncomfortable with the conversation, it's because it's the fear of the unknown, right? You're worried that this prenup is not going to protect you. It's going to gatekeep you from assets that you are otherwise entitled to under the law. And what I like to remind people is like, I know that a prenup is an emotional document. It's just as much an emotional document as it is a legal document. But if you don't get a prenup, right? You still have a prenup. It's just that your state legislature is deciding for you. Um, and if it's up to me and I have a choice between making the rules myself or letting my state legislature decide how my assets in debt are divided or held, I would much rather make those rules myself. And that is by definition a prenuptial agreement.
And in your experience with HelloPrenup and even as a divorce lawyer, were there certain things that stood out to you where you were like, "Oh, this is a red flag here. This is a person trying to take advantage." Are there, like, some specific, instances that really come to you as, "Oh, this person needs to be careful?"
Yeah. Well, I think the way that I would phrase that is I've never seen a fair and equitable prenup clause cause a relationship issue, right? It's not the reasonable person who only wants to get on the same page and have these important life conversations. It's when couples are in very different places, and they can't align on those core values, right? And the prenup just dredges that all up, right? And I would encourage couples who are unable to align on terms, and really what that means is core values, is they need to be rethinking maybe how they're approaching marriage, and maybe who they're approaching marriage with in the first place. Because again, a prenup is an opportunity to have these life planning conversations. And if you can't even do that in a calm and respectful manner before you're getting married, you really need to think about if this is the right relationship, or perhaps how to better hone your communication skills.
I mean, you have, like, a front seat now to how these things go down at HelloPrenup. So, I mean, how many prenups have y'all had signed on the website so far?
Oh, many, many, many. So, since 2021, Hello Prenup has helped over 100,000 partners. We've protected over $26 billion in assets, and about 20% of U.S. prenups run through the Hello Prenup platform. So, we have seen thousands and thousands of couples, and I'm very, proud to say I've been able to meet some of them along the way and hear their love stories, and how a prenup has really improved their relationship in very meaningful ways.
Yeah, in your experience, are there things that you learned, while leading HelloPrenup that you didn't realize before? Like, are there, like, certain statistics that sort of jumped out at you as, "Wow, I didn't really know this until I saw sort of the broad data."
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I think one of the things that initially really surprised me was the diverse range of couples we have, right? We have billionaires and celebrities, but like just as I said before, regular people. 75% of our customers are under 40 years old. Like I said before, they have a salary of $92,000 and are about $79,000 in debt. So, it's really, I think it's fascinating that prenups have increased so much in the recent years. There was a Harvard study about 10, 15 years back that said only 5% of all marriages had a prenup. There was a recent Harris poll that said 47% of millennials and Gen Zs who are married or engaged to be married have a prenup, right? So you can see that significant increase over the years. And I think that a lot of that is due to the fact that prenups are now far more accessible than they were before. They're more cost effective, right? Hello Prenup is, $600 for a prenup for both partners. And if they want to add on attorney services to that, they can do so at exclusive flat rate pricing that they just can't get anywhere else. And so, again, I think that is one of the things that that is really of note to me. I think something else that I'd like to mention is that 52% of our initial signups are women, right? Um, and this is a figure that's remained pretty consistent over the past couple of years. It initially really surprised me, and I wondered if, as we scaled, that would remain to be the case. But I think it's still surprising in some ways, given the longstanding perception that prenups tend to favor men. But what it goes to show is that that's just not true. That's not the case. And women are, especially millennial and Gen Z women, are highly focused on protecting their financial well being and assets entering into a marriage.
I love the way you phrased it as we have protected these many billions of assets. And when I talked to Kevin O'Leary as well from Shark Tank, who's one of the investors in your company, he really emphasized that it's women protecting their assets. Is that something that you see as the social impact of Apollo Prenup? Sort of women protecting themselves from financial abuse or, you know?
Yeah, I do think it's very important. I think all couples should be protecting themselves. I think women in particular are vulnerable at different stages in their lives. And just even working as a divorce attorney, I've seen so many women who leave the workforce and they do so to either raise children or take care of sick family members. And statistically, women are the ones to do that. And incomes, even if they stay in the workforce, then we see the motherhood penalty, right? So, what ends up happening is their husbands have this career trajectory and earning trajectory that's straight upwards. Meanwhile, they're now taking 5, 10 years out of the workforce and have a really hard time recovering. And so many people just think the default is, well, that's where alimony and child support come in. But if you're on the west or east coast of this country and housing prices and costs of living is so astronomically high, that's not going to be enough to carry a family post divorce. And that's where I think that prenups are incredibly important for women, not only protecting what they have going into the marriage premaritally, but also offering them additional protections that the law just can't provide for. An example of that at HelloPrenup is we have equalization clauses, right? Which, can operate in varying forms. But one form is that, for example, if one party, has X percent less in wealth than the other, then the couple can choose to equalize that wealth by um, attributing money to the other party in a separate bank account that is individually controlled by them, right? And so, again, I think that's really important for women who are either stay at home moms or, again, leave the workforce to take care of family members because it's very important, as Kevin has said over and over again, to have your own financial autonomy and control over your own money.
Have you noticed there are sort of cultural or traditional differences that come in the way of people accepting prenups or creating prenups?
Absolutely. And I've seen it. I've seen it in my own family, right? I have a family member who is soon getting married, and his future wife is not from the United States, and she was highly opposed to a prenup. Right. And these are people who I'm very, very close to. And she was opposed to it because she didn't understand it. In her culture, it's just not something that is done. And I think that's the case for many parts of the world, right? Um, and I think, it was such a breakthrough for me to see the change in her perception of prenups after we sat down and we talked about how this prenup could protect her. And in the actual scenarios, the examples that she could understand that would relate to her own life and her future husband's plans for their life together. And I think once she was able to see that and in those examples illustrated for her, she started to feel far more comfortable with it. And her questions were very insightful and on point. And at the end of this process and these conversations, actually, she was the one who was like the advocate, the ultimate advocate for prenups. And I just thought that was really interesting because you can take these cultural differences, but at the end of the day, we're all the same in that we really are all working towards the same goal, which is a long, happy, productive, secure marriage.
I was looking online about conversations about prenups, and there seems to be a lot of concern about will they hold up in court? Will this document actually come through for us when we need it? At Hello Prenup, I know it's an easier process. I think there's the option of having an attorney involved, but it's not necessary. How would you address those kind of concerns about will this document actually hold up?
Yeah, great question. We get this question all the time. There is a perception out there that prenups don't hold up, and that's just not accurate. I rarely see prenups not get upheld in court. And in fact, they're routinely enforced, right, around the country. Now, of course, there are exceptions to this, right? Like one big one is lack of financial disclosure. So if you or your spouse is lying or hiding assets or isn't filling out your financial disclosure, this puts your prenup in danger, right? A judge is going to look at that in the future and say, Maybe there wasn't disclosure. Maybe one party didn't understand the rights that they're waiving. But if you have full financial disclosure, you're setting yourself up for enforcement. And then I think the other potential issue that I see a lot with couples is if they're not following state specific requirements for validity of the prenuptial agreement. Now, HelloPrenup solves for all of this, right? We are state specific across the country, across 48 states. We have very strict requirements when it comes to financial disclosure. Some states allow you actually to waive financial disclosure. We don't allow you to do that at HelloPrenup because ultimately what it's doing is just allowing this argument in the future as to why this prenup should be invalidated. And then with attorney services, yeah, a lot of our customers appreciate the option to add attorney services. And I think it's great because it offers this extra peace of mind. In Hello Prenup, as I said before, offers this flat rate pricing for representation. So, like full scale, our most basic option for a prenuptial agreement is $599 per couple. And then you can either, just do the prenup yourself if your state allows for that, which is again a fraction of the cost of the traditional route of going to an attorney. And you get you still get a very high quality state specific prenup. But if you do want to add attorney services to that, you certainly can at $699 for full representation. And notarization is included in that. So we're really proud of how we're democratizing access to not just prenups, but attorney services in this same way through the platform.
So, are there certain states where both parties need to be represented by an attorney?
There are, yes. So there are certain states and there are certain circumstances. So for example, in California, if you're going to waive or modify spousal support in any way, then you must have an attorney at the time of signing. And so situations like that necessitate both parties to have an attorney throughout the transaction.
And the platform will kind of prompt you to do that.
Yes, exactly. The platform does prompt you to do that. Yeah.
Okay, that's perfect. Yeah, I think that's all I really wanted on the prenups. I also wanted to ask you, when people sign prenups, I know there's the concept of the postnuptial agreement.
Yes.
So once you're married with the prenup, are there circumstances where you need to revisit? Can you edit the prenup in some way, or does that go into a postnup scenario?
Great question. It depends on which state that you're in. So certain states allow you to actually edit the prenup, and it becomes an addendum to the original prenuptial agreement. Typically, this has to be done in the same formality as the original document was written and executed, right? Some states, if you do edit that prenup at all, it then becomes a postnuptial agreement. Pre and post, obviously, a prenup has to be signed, executed prior to marriage. A postnuptial agreement is only post-marital. And again, certain states have additional rules as to what can actually be contracted to based off of how long you've been married. So postnups tend to vary based off of, were you only married for like 6 months or a year, or were you married for 25 years? There's a big difference there.
Okay, got it. I also wanted to ask you, since you were also on Shark Tank, and I mean, I'm sure that was a fabulous experience. And as a young sort of female entrepreneur, what are some of the best pieces of advice you've had in business?
I think that there are a couple of pieces of advice that I find to be true today. The first is that authenticity trumps everything else, right? Customers, investors, partners ultimately value authenticity above polish. And that is something that I think my team has always done really, really well because we are deeply passionate about the company that we are building, about the mission of Hello Prenup in democratizing access to this legal service in family law in a way that just did not exist before we came along. And so that is one piece of advice and truth that I have found along the way. Um, and then I think a second one is you have to love who you work with. right? The people who you're going to build, if you're an entrepreneur and you have a startup, the people that you're going to build this company, work day in and day out tirelessly on this mission with, have to be people that you truly feel aligned with, both in terms of mission, work ethic, values. And I feel very, very blessed that I found those people early and often. And I love working with them every day.
Yeah, I recall it was really interesting the way you met your co-founder. I think y'all met online at some point because it was during the pandemic.
Yes. So Sarah Beth and I met because she was looking for a prenuptial agreement. She was engaged and she reached out to HelloPrenup and said, I'm a software engineer and I would love to connect with you about your platform and what you're building. And that's kind of how we got started prior to Shark Tank. I've also met other members of my team very similarly. Lauren, my chief marketing officer, I met her because she had a prenup the traditional way and was in a marriage where she was really unhappy with the terms because when she created her prenup, she wasn't given the option to include an equalization clause or any of these kind of creative solutions that Hello Prenup has built in. And so she was really driven by the mission to ensure that other women did not have her same experience. So yeah, I've met a lot of my team members in that way, and again, I think finding people to work with who are really driven by the same mission as you are is incredibly important.
I love a mission-driven company. I was wondering, have you ever thought about financial literacy is somehow linked to women signing prenups? Do you feel like that's one of the reasons that more people are getting prenups is that women understand finances more and are encouraged to take more of an interest, which traditionally they were taught not to?
Absolutely. I think it has a lot to do with millennial and Gen Z women being aware of the importance of their autonomy, their independence. And I love to see that generational shift because I don't think it was always that way. I also think that, we have a sizable portion of our customers who are second marriages, right? So a lot of those women who have gone through divorces, they've seen the financial havoc that it can wreak on their lives and they want to do it right the second time. They want to do it differently. I do think that financial literacy is incredibly important. And Deborah, to give you an example of that, I'm on the board of a nonprofit called Savvy Ladies. And Savvy Ladies' mission is to do exactly that: financial literacy for women in underserved communities. And I'm really proud of the work that they're doing to help, again, ease access to information that, again, is otherwise just not available to large segments of women across the country.